Good afternoon, everyone. If you look at the media headlines, it's amazing because there's no topic more polarizing than AI. On one hand, you have the Pollyannas who claim that AI is going to solve everything: world hunger, climate crisis, social inequalities, and usher us into an amazingly enlightened era. On the other hand, you have the Cassandras who actually lament the fact that AI is going to destroy millions of jobs, disrupt whole industries, and only aggravate inequalities worldwide. So we wanted to bring you a more nuanced view, perspective into AI. And so when I was invited to moderate this panel, I decided that one way to do that is to focus on the business value that AI can bring to enterprises like yours, and also talk about how you as business leaders in the audience can best leverage AI to unlock its full potential. And I must say that I'm super thrilled to have with us four tech leaders who are at the forefront of AI innovation, hence the title of this panel, the Innovation Arms Race. And so we are going to dive into it quickly, and what I will do is actually have them first introduce themselves briefly and tell a bit more about their product, and then we will go deeper into conversation. So, Vishal, can you tell us more about what your product or service does, and also what makes it very unique?
Thanks so much, Navi. So my product, we are focused on the problem of simplifying IT at enterprises and giving business people superpower, super agency using generative AI. The way we do that to start with is give business users, like people in the finance team or in the procurement or manufacturing team or sales and marketing teams, the ability to have a conversation with their data, bypassing the entire complexity that sits today between the business user and the data that they need. And in order to do that, you have to carry the burden of, on the one hand, speaking the language of the business users, and on the other hand, removing all the hallucinations, the errors that AI, because the AI models have not been trained on a particular company's data and things like that. And so with our product, a financial analyst or a finance person can simply have a conversation with what happened with their numbers, what happened in their business. In fact, even get into what are the recommendations for growth initiatives or saving costs, or what are the unusual things that have happened and things like that. It is like giving them wings. And in the process of giving them wings, you're also simplifying the incredible cost that sits there. Doing that, the difficult thing that we have to do is to, on the one hand, remove hallucinations out of data, of creating the code that runs on the data. That's a very hard problem because hallucinations are, in some sense, inherent to generative AI. And on the other hand, disambiguating things for the business user, speaking their lingo, understanding what they mean by certain words and things like that. So we have solved that, and we are seeing great success. We partnered with TCS in India, and together with TCS, together with other partners like SAP, we are seeing tremendous growth.
So you call that conversational AI? Is that one
conversational analytics to start with, but over time, conversational business.
Okay. Nigel, tell us more about your offering in the AI space.
Sure. Nigel Vaz. I run Publicis Sapient, and Sapient was a services business primarily focused on transformation. And what we're doing today is really taking a people and product approach to how enterprises need to transform. The biggest challenge we see with almost every enterprise today as tech becomes a bigger and bigger part of the ecosystem is the enormous tech debt before they can actually start to really move into the digital space. And so how do you actually leverage AI in order to release yourself from that tech debt and split the investment from 80% keep the lights on and 20% innovation to the other way around. And so our platform, Slingshot, is essentially all about how you can actually modernize and transform the enterprise at AI scale. So, we think of ourselves as the kind of Navy SEALs to the regular services industry of regular Army. And then the second platform, Bodhi, which is basically our agentic platform, is all about capturing the years and years of very specific industry-specific patterns across financial services, retail, CPG, automotive, where we've codified years of transformation knowledge into the ability to scale those solutions really fast to get agents up and running in a way that allows our clients to solve really specific business problems that we understand deeply how to solve. Because our belief today is that AI isn't necessarily limited by the technology or the compute. It's limited by a little bit of, the fragmentation of data, the complexity in the organization in terms of understanding the actual problems you're trying to solve, and more importantly, not simply applying AI to an existing approach or process, but reimagining it in the context of where you are now able to do something dramatically different than you were before. And so ultimately our promise to a lot of our clients is doing things that would take them 10 years in 2 or 3, or doing things that would take them tens of millions of dollars. And so it's faster speed, it's more economical, but more importantly, it's building intelligence in the organization beyond, for the first time, their people. So truly intelligent systems that can learn and evolve as their business evolves.
So your target is mostly enterprises, is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're enterprise focused entirely.
Jonathan, tell us more about Grok and what is your value proposition to customers?
So Grok builds AI chips. Those AI chips run AI fast, and the problem we solve is we make AI fast because no one wants slow AI, which I hear the Indian market likes. As fast as my answer.
That was super fast. We'll come back to the super fast inferencing. Chris, how about your company's value prop?
Well, it's thrilling to be here today. Thank you very much. My name is Chris Perry. I'm president of Broadridge Financial Solutions. We're a $30 billion S&P 500 New York Stock Exchange listed company, and we're fundamentally the arteries of Wall Street. We settle $10 trillion in trades per day. We send out $7 billion communications to investors. We handle the annual shareholder meetings for most public companies. And so AI for us is a transformative industry scenario where we can look for ways to de-risk, because regulatory and compliance is huge. Obviously find efficiencies in marketplace, where we can redeploy human intelligence against things that will add more value, and use artificial intelligence at things that are less value and can be done with systematized tools. And then most importantly, redeploy the dollars that are saved on growth, because growth is infinite and cost savings and efficiencies is finite. So that's what we do.
Great. So I think I wanted to, in the spirit of what I said earlier, to kind of really make it very tangible for you what actually business benefits you can accrue from these gentlemen's solutions. I wanted to ask each of them to give some concrete examples about how the solution can help you achieve, truly competitive advantage. So, Jonathan, let me start with you. So, Time Magazine said that your language processing units can process AI models 10 times faster and cheaper than GPUs. So, this is called ultra-fast inferencing, I believe. Can you give us some use cases so the audience understand what business benefits they can get from such ultra-fast inferencing?
One of the main use cases for us today is starting to become coding. So whenever one of your engineers is trying to create something and they put in a prompt and they say, create this for me, if it takes 2 minutes or even 30 seconds to give you an answer, they fall out of what's called flow. That is, they lose their attention on the task and then they move to other things, which makes them less productive. By giving them an answer in 1 second, they actually can stay in flow and keep going and going and going and iterating. That's one use case. Another use case is just like when you iterate on something, you make it better. When you're fast, you can actually iterate on the response multiple times before you give it. So whenever you see the models doing reasoning, we've been doing demos this week and showing people we can often do the reasoning in about 100 milliseconds or less, meaning that before you give an answer, you're able to do that reasoning without slowing the answers down. That's particularly important if you're doing voice in AI. And then lastly, we also drive the cost down quite a bit. The thing that most people don't realize is the speed at which you output a token, which is the unit of intelligence of these models. The faster, typically, the more expensive. What our product has really done is it's sort of reset that so that given a certain speed, we cost much less, which allows us to also run fast, but also run cheaper. So in the Indian market in particular, cost is important. I've heard over and over again while here.
You're value conscious.
99 rupees per month. So that's the price target you got to hit. You can't do that if you're giving 70% margins to an NVIDIA maker or a GPU maker, and the thing's already expensive to begin with.
So building on the idea of time is essence. So I was just thinking, are there some use cases like where time is really critical, like drug discovery or today climate change? You know, there's a urgency to solve it. Are there some examples like that where your technology can be a godsend?
Well, the speed of iteration is the speed of innovation. So in science, it's not about, so you would think that you could just have a very large number of compute devices operating in parallel, but being able to get an answer and then iterate on it is more powerful. And I'll give an example. Suppose that I ask any one of you to write an essay about your favorite topic, but I tell you that you can't hit the backspace or delete key on your keyboard. How good is that first draft going to be? Probably not very good. Now, if you ask 10 different people to write an essay on that topic, none of them are going to be particularly good. But you let one of them try 10 times, having seen the previous output, it's going to get better each time. So being able to do things serially is inherently more powerful because you learn from each attempt and incorporate that. So that speed is really important in discovery or in invention.
Great. Chris, I have a question for you because we talk about AI applications in different sectors in a very generic way, but I thought maybe the audience would enjoy learning from you, like how do we apply AI in a particular sector like financial services? So I Googled before this panel, like, you know, AI financial services. A lot of the use cases seem to be all about automating workflows to make things faster and whatnot. But can you tell the audience here how the financial service sector can embrace AI in India in a way that is not just focused on innovating products and services, but maybe developing disruptive new business models that can help them deliver great value and maybe even, you know, become industry leaders?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about AI, and not very much talk about data. And AI is only as good as the data. It's a bit like if you ask your not-so-smart friend a question and you ask your smart friend a question, which answer do you want? So for us, where we sit on $10 trillion worth of settlement data every day, we sit on shareholder information around the globe, you know, we look at use cases that would allow, for example, wealth management firms to find the next best opportunity for their client, or even to find ways that will allow their existing client to refer without having to do the referral to their network. So there's lots of use cases that help people grow their businesses on the back of the data sets that exist that are very pure, because you can have settlement data that's not pure. It's reconciled every day. The other thing in our industry, in the financial services industry, has a lot of dimensions to it. Two that are really important is reducing risk. So when you make a failed trade, that's highly risky. It also has a lot of capital and collateral that can be tied up. And one of the other things we do is we are bringing technologies together. So I talked about data being important, talked about AI clearly, but we're also bringing things like blockchain into the equation to create more efficient markets, less risk. So there's lots of use cases that, you know, the Indian companies, and we have 5,000 people on the ground in India who are evolving from what was an offshoring, outsourcing captive to truly an innovative engineering agenda where we're building new products with product leadership that are globally sitting here.
You haven't directly answered my question, so I just want to come back to it. But can you give like one example of a client or someone who you helped who actually used your solutions to reinvent themselves or, you know, come up with a new business model that actually they couldn't have done without the technology, for instance?
Well, the one I would focus on, you know, you're asking me to give away proprietary secrets. The one I would probably look at is today, the ability to bond trade is complex. And you generally have to have a Bloomberg terminal to do that. What we've been able to do is use natural language to talk to analytics, again, leveraging the data, because you put the data next to it. You have to have the data to do it. And we've had institutions that have been able to use something called Bond GPT, which is a natural language engine to ask very complex questions and launch new business initiatives. That's been one. There's been others that the hedge funds would use because hedge funds are looking for anomalies to trade. One very well-known name that I can't mention has acquired certain data, and with the computing power in AI, their traders are able to do things in real time that often they would have to have analysts do for them. And the iteration speed that Jonathan's talked about is it's profound. It's seconds of response time on things that would be days, and when the market moves away. So these are the kinds of new business initiatives firms can do as technology providers or traders or both.
So thanks for sharing those transformative impacts of AI in the financial service sector. Nigel, I want to come back to you because one of the things we are beginning to do here is to show that there are many low-hanging fruits in AI that can be reaped at some point, and that's what everybody's writing about. But you have been very critical, or at least softly critical, about the fact that today there's a lot of hype around AI tools, but the real value in the long term is going to be having AI platforms. And you are actually helping deploy what you call foundational enterprise AI platforms in companies. Tell us more about them, and in a way, what's the value for the leaders here to embrace that as opposed to, chasing the low-hanging fruits with some point solutions?
I think what we've seen is an explosion of proofs of concepts, right? Because we've seen those a dime a dozen, and they're very hard to scale in the context of the value that you ask. So a lot of the work we're doing is actually saying what business problems can be solved to the platforms I was talking about before in a specific industry. So I'll use a couple of examples. So in hospitals, getting referred to biopsies is super expensive because you don't know whether a tumor is malignant or not. So how can you actually either support or aid, or in some cases, do the same job that a radiologist with 20 years of training might do, looking at a number of scans to start to determine whether somebody needs to go to a biopsy or not, right? That's crazy specific problem in a specific industry like healthcare, where you are affecting meaningfully not only the patient experience, but billions of dollars in cost for procedures that might be unnecessary and painful to the individual to actually solve. I'll give you another one in the hotel space. And these are things we're doing now, and they're live, and they're being used to create or save millions of dollars, right? How many of you, all of you probably many times a year will book a hotel room? What's the process to do it, right? You go to a hotel website and you say, these are my dates. I'm looking for this kind of room in this kind of place. But the intent behind what you're actually trying to do is hidden from the hotel because it's got very specific parameters by which you. What if you created a white box, which we did in the case of one of the largest hotel groups in the world, and said, hey, we are a couple with a young child. We're looking for sun in this price range and a flight distance not more than so many hours from where we live. And you just got back options, right? That transforms your experience because you're able to express what you're looking for, the young child, the kinds of things that might be interesting to them, but then to them, it gives them the intent behind why you're asking for what you're asking for. So it allows them to match inventory that otherwise might not have actually shown up in the context of your language to you. So it's essentially helping them actually use inventory that otherwise might never have been served up to you because they were going on the basis of what they thought about you versus what your intent was. So dramatic outcomes in terms of conversion rates, but also the speed at which you're executing.
When you said enterprise, I also want to interrupt you, but I think the two examples you gave, one of the things that happens in the late 90s when the internet came, there were a lot of point solutions adopted by specific functions. So I was kind of wondering if you can also explain how having an enterprise-wide AI platform enables kind of cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And avoid the kind of ILOs.
But I wanted to start with the consumer side, right? Because the enterprise side is much more technical and interesting for some of us. But actually, I think a lot of people are like, well, what does this AI actually do for me, right? And in these instances, if you did that, so let's just take the hotel example, right? And you start to say, one of the biggest challenges in a hotel like that is you've got 5 or 6 systems that the person at the check-in desk needs to access in order to figure out whether you're a loyalty member, where you last stayed, what your preferences are. There are multiple systems. There's a room management system. There's a property management system. There are multiple systems, right? And what you're now basically saying is, hey, The biggest issue, the reservation system, all of these things were built on mainframes, built in the 80s, in some cases even earlier. Very hard to change. So what's been happening since the internet is we built layers and layers on top of that, a little bit like Vishal was talking about, to abstract the complexity from those. But the actual core of those systems have stayed the same. You can look at financial services, and most banks run mainframe core banking at the core. So when they compete against a fintech to change a product or to offer a new service, it's extraordinarily complex, which is why in the hotel example, all the margins got taken away by digital OTPs, right? Online travel portals, because they were able to abstract themselves from that legacy and change the consumer interface. And what we're now saying is, you've got to start to be able to use AI to do stuff that was going to take you 10 years to do, and maybe tens of millions of dollars, to accelerate the process, but more importantly, institutionalize the knowledge that sat in a mainframe, which was extraordinarily hard to access and very difficult to interface with, in a way that you can engage with it to solve problems like, oh, this person's just walked up. We understand their preferences. We understand they may not have the right status, but we're looking at their forward bookings, and they've got a lot of them. And so we make a different decision than we might have made otherwise. Or in the case of a bank, you're basically failing a credit check because your credit scores are bad, but that might be because we haven't joined the dots on the fact that you actually don't borrow a lot. You run a cash-heavy financial services presence, in which case we can still afford to loan you that loan on the basis of securitization against the cash that we have access to. These are decisions that just were not possible to be made in the enterprise because these data sets were separate. The systems essentially were monolithic. And so now when you institutionalize a platform like our Bodhi platform or our Slingshot platform, what you're doing is you're extracting all of the insight from these systems that were monolithic mainframes that were really hard to change in order to create the kind of flexibility of a system that's learning as you go. Because I think the biggest shift we have to make with AI for me in the enterprise is move the knowledge from the intelligence being just in people to being in people and technology that's truly intelligent, as opposed to technology that we have not been able to communicate with, and a whole cadre of engineers essentially got built because these systems were too hard to talk to.
Right. Yeah, this concept of infinite personalization is critical, because before you would build apps in most verticals, but financial services, for 7 personas, high net worth, whatever it would be. With AI, you now have the ability to do infinite personality responses. And in a country with 1.6 billion people, that's pretty important. So I think that's going to be a launch pin for institutions, especially the O-lines who are pulling. The mainframes work fantastic, actually, but they can't do anything modern. So you got to pull those things out and then put layers in that'll be modernization that creates personalization for your customer, so they don't leave you and go to a disruptor.
Absolutely. For a land of great diversity like India, definitely offering personalized solutions would be a godsend. Vishal, I come back to what Nigel said about the need to reduce the complexity of accessing things like mainframe data, which now becomes easier. And you have made your life mission now to humanize AI by making AI's tools easier to use. Tell us why the notion of usability is becoming important to boost AI adoption, and maybe you can even touch upon whether India has a kind of an advantage in that area, and also explain how having a seamless user interface is critical, so that the frontline employees, not just decision makers, can actually access this data and make use of it.
No, absolutely. So if you look at a business user who is a completely non-technical person, giving them the ability to have a conversation with their data, it needs a lot of scaffolding. They want to know how their business is doing. They have a new region that they opened up in, or a new product that they launched. How is this doing? Or they have a cost-related initiative that they need to get into. They have thousands of questions. And to Jonathan's point about flow, once you give them a way to have a conversation with the data, that they can stay in their flow, so their next question and the question after that and the question after that can just keep coming, it is incredibly powerful. The value of that to the enterprise is enormous. If you ask a question about, hey, how is our new product doing in Latin America or some new region that you launched in, and the IT guy tells you that, hey, can I get back to you in 5 days? You have forgotten why you wanted to ask the question in 5 days. you have to be able to get back the answer in a second or in a few seconds. Or if you ask complex questions like, I have this initiative, I need to save costs in these areas, or I need to understand why certain customers are not as profitable as these other customers. You would be asking analysts or people at consultancies and so forth to go and find out those things. Now you can get that done, maybe not in 2 seconds, but in 2 minutes you get back a well-researched analysis that has gone into all corners of the data to figure out why that happened. These are magical things to business people. But getting there, you need to give them the scaffolding that if you ask a question that the system doesn't understand, instead of hallucinating an answer, you need to say, hey, did you mean this or did you mean that? So it opens up entirely new paradigms in usability. Now, if you think about in the Indian context, you go into creators or artists or artisans, people like this, giving them, there is a big bridge to be built between them and the AI systems, which may be fluent in the thing that they are interested in talking about, but to give them that access needs the usability, needs the local languages, understanding their domain, where they're coming from, their context and things like that. So I think the more that we wish to empower people with AI, the more important usability becomes, the human centricity becomes.
So usability, building on Chris' point about the diversity of this country, you also think that it's a factor to boost the accessibility? Because you often talk about, I'm an expert in frog innovation, so India is known as for affordable innovation, but I think you're saying that accessibility is important because if you don't speak in the same language, even if it's cheap, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Part of the speed point that Jonathan made also makes things accessible. When you do things faster, you are inherently lowering the cost of doing this. When you want to have, so if you look at DeepSeek, for example, DeepSeek dropped about, there is a wide consensus now, as far as I can tell, that 50x improvement in price performance compared to comparable models. There is still going to be a lot more room to improve there, and yet there is a scarcity of compute and products like what John builds. So I think to get AI access, one of the things the Prime Minister really is passionate about is how do you get 1 billion people access to AI? Creators, artisans, teachers, people who are making jewelry or making textiles and things like that. You have to drop the cost of the access dramatically in order to do that. So advances in the infrastructure, of course, in silicon, but also the advances in making the models cheaper to run and making the technology accessible through various access channels. All of these have to be done to get us to the point where 1 billion people can access this.
All right. Now, I'm also conscious. I promised that I will carve out some time for addressing at least 2 of your questions because time is running out. But I do want to segue into the second part, which is going to be more exciting, close to my heart, which is how can actually India not just leapfrog, but actually trailblaze next generation, AI models and practices and paradigms. So I want to start with Jonathan. Your question for you is, so clearly India is going to be a big AI demand market. But at the same time, the reality is that we are still kind of depending on a lot of global players, whether it's for computing, for chips, or even for capital. So what's your take or advice for India to assume global leadership in AI? Should we build our own full AI stack like we did with the DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure? Or should we play it smart by aligning with some global players, including yourself? You're most welcome here to set up an R&D center. And at the same time, protecting our national interest. So which way we should go?
Okay, well, I'm a little biased, so I say you should work with other players. But I would play to strengths. So one of the mistakes that I see over and over again is that everyone wants to recreate the entire AI stack from scratch. If you want to create the entire AI scratch from stack, what happens is you start building the models, then you start building the systems, then you start building the chips. Well, then you have to build the fabs. And don't forget, you have to build the wafers. And don't forget, you have to build the machines that build the wafers, right? It's silly. At some point, there will be interdependence. And that's actually good because that leads to peace and prosperity because then you're forced to work with your neighbors. So I would recommend instead of trying to do everything from scratch, pick the areas where you have comparative advantage, focus on that, and then others will be happy to trade with you. Now, the biggest issue that I've seen while I've been here in India, it's actually the language gap. So these models are not trained very well on the Indian languages. Depending on whom you ask, there's 12, 20 plus languages that you must support to be viable. Indian companies have that data, but what I would recommend is I would put together a group to pool that data, and then I would fine-tune the existing models. So a lot of people are trying to train their own. The reason I would recommend against this is these models learn universal truths that can then be kept when you go and you fine-tune it further. And I'll give an example. So everyone thinks that these models just auto-complete the next word. That's true, but auto-completing the next word is actually quite powerful. So suppose that I have an entire detective murder mystery novel. It's 100 plus pages long, maybe 200 pages long. And we feed in the entire book up to the point where it says, and the detective said, the murderer is. For you to auto-complete that, you had to understand everything that happened in that book. You had to understand social interactions, you had to understand the evidence, you had to do reasoning, you had to do all these things. All of that is in these models that are being open sourced. If you then take that model and you fine-tune it with Indian language examples, you get all of that benefit for free, and now it knows how to speak these languages. So my focus would be take the existing open source models, let other suckers spend $5 billion, $10 billion training these things, then spend a couple $1 million fine-tuning it for the Indian market.
So building on that, Chris, let's apply that thinking to a particular field like financial services. As you may know, India has an ambition to become a global financial service hub, as we see with the creation of the GIFT City in Gujarat. So what's your take? And by the way, Chris was telling me that he actually visited other well-known financial services hubs around the world. So what can India do to kind of not leapfrog, but trailblaze in terms of becoming a world-class financial service hub, but also building a next-generation financial services infrastructure by leveraging creatively AI?
Yeah, this is incredibly exciting here in India because if you take places like the UAE, Guernsey, the Bahamas, these are tax havens for investment, and you have many asset management firms, many of which are clients of ours, that are operating in those places. What they have is governmental tax status, and they have money. And you come to India, and you have the ability to do those things. You government support right now, clearly, to create this status. There is government money that can be behind it, given the prosperity, and you have tech computing capability here. They don't have tech computing capability there. They buy it, and they apply it. But here you can bring it all together and have one unique proposition that I think is highly differentiated. I think the other element of this is that locally you're going to have an infrastructure that the minister talked about 200 gigawatts of renewable energy here soon and 500 gigabytes in 2050, because energy is going to be really important. You talked about fuel in your remarks earlier, that AI is more like fuel and internet. That's a bigger conversation I'd love to have with you. Ask Robinhood if it fueled their business worldwide. But I really think that you've got to have the power to be able to do it, and your government is enabling that. So you bring those things together, and there's a profound opportunity for tax status. So you don't have to go to Guernsey. There's not much in Guernsey. It's not a very big place, but you get great tax status. You now have that ability here with the infrastructure that wants to mature, because if India doesn't transition from an offshore low-cost arbitrage to a tech leadership innovator, AI is going to be its biggest problem.
I agree. Good point. So on that note, let's come to Nigel. So you also have been advocating the fact that business leaders have a role to play in terms of governing the adoption of AI. And India is a very young and impatient nation, and we don't want to wait until 2030 to harness the full potential of AI. So what suggestions you have for the business leader in the audience so they can start unlocking the AI potential starting next year and not wait until 2030?
Yeah, and I go so far as to say not next year, but now, right? I mean, because I think that the biggest opportunity you have today is not to simply apply AI to what you're doing today, but really look at every aspect of what you do. And we work with so many businesses from hospitals and healthcare and retail and CPG to reimagine how you would do this in an intelligent environment where the intelligence is held outside of just your people. I mean, talking about the India angle just for a second, Sapient's part of Publicis, one of the largest advertising marketing holding company, and we built a platform for them called Core AI, which took an industry that's been kind of matching brands and consumers for 60 years through narrative and story and saying, how do you get that same emotion, but do it in a way that allows you to target that person on the basis of their not only just what they've done from a cookie-based approach, but do it in a way that allows you to harness the interactions, pre-login, post-login in the context of an experience, and get the right message to the right person on the right channel on the right device to cut out all of the spam and cost, right? So you're improving the outcomes for the end consumer, but you're fundamentally taking something that's been done one way for a really long period of time and just reimagining it in a very different way. And I think that is the power of, AI today, to just change the economics. So you take a business that was primarily run one way and you create significant amounts of value by just reimagining it in the context of how it could do something today.
So not just optimize the existing business, but think about,
and
the next...
real reimagination. And the one thing maybe I'll just chip in there is we use an analogy called SPEEDS in the context of our transformation. It stands for strategy, product, experience, engineering, data, and AI. And across all of those, we think that those are like fingers in the hand. If you reimagine all of those, you can really create acceleration to move quickly in an AI-first world.
Unfortunately, we're running out in 40 minutes. We have wrap up, but I do want to give the last word to Vishal, because you did meet Prime Minister Modi earlier this year, and you had a long conversation about AI, and he expressed his interest in using AI to empower the youth. So how do you see AI playing a role in empowering youth employment in a country where 12 million young people enter the workforce each year?
No, I met him earlier in the year, and I also met him day before yesterday. He's really looking forward to his speech tonight. He's very passionate about, in particular, about the youth and giving the young people, the students, all the way into middle school students, even younger, the access to AI, so they can, whatever it is that you do, whatever walk of life you are in, it is now possible to all of a sudden have access to a sum total of all that is known about that field. That is an incredible power, and we have to switch our perspective from how is this going to affect our jobs and things like that, to how does this empower us? How does this make us stronger? I think he has a unique ability to understand these concepts. He understands them in his own way incredibly quickly. It's something very, very impressive. But where he wants to apply this, there is an event coming up in February where he wants to showcase this. In particular, how the youth of the country can really benefit from AI in whatever it is that they do. Not in any particular one field or the other, but in whatever it is that they do. And I also want to, Navi, on the point about should we have our own model, I think, Jonathan's point is right, obviously, that you have to partner with the best and so on. I think that has to be done. But at the same time, AI is too important. And India is too big and too diverse and too important to the world to leave that incredibly important layer. We have to have our own models. I think to me it is absolutely clear.
Sorry, we have to wrap up, otherwise we'll be kicked out. So thank you so much, and give a big round of applause to panelists. Thank you so much.